Hello, everyone, and welcome to our CME Palooza 10th year anniversary interview series, which we are calling 10 Years in 10 Minutes. We're going to be talking to a number of different people, 6 in total, I think, unless we change that up. My name is Derek Warnick, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza. It is about to rain here in Philadelphia, so my room is very dark. Whenever I turn on the lights, it's like this. It feels like I have this huge spotlight on my head, so I try to keep them off. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We're going to ask some people to talk about their experience, some of the first speakers from our very first CME Palooza, which was May 20th and 21st, 2014. And we're bringing back some of the speakers from that time, talk about their experience, what topic they presented on, how that's changed over the past 10 years, maybe how they've changed over the past 10 years or their careers changed, things like that. I'm joined today by Brian McGowan, a man who probably needs not much of an introduction for most of you, but just in case, Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure, Derek. Thank you, of course, for having me. My name is Brian McGowan. I had the honor of being the first presenter on the first session of CME Palooza. I've spent the last 13 years as co-founder and chief learning officer at Archimedics. Prior to that, I oversaw all of oncology education at Pfizer. Prior to that, I oversaw all medical education at Wyeth. And for the decade before that, I was either in a provider or in small supporter offices. So I've been doing this not quite as long as Derek. I think you've got me by 2 or 3 years,
I
but we're
started in
both.
2000.
And I'm 2004,
Ooh,
I think, right after my second postdoc. So I've been around
young
forever.
whippersnapper.
A decade has gone by, and the week after the first CME Palooza, I turned 40. So, so
Do the math. Thank you for coming on. You were the first presenter, and I remember I had 2 reasons. Well, probably more than 2 reasons, but 2 reasons in particular why I asked you and then why I put you first on the agenda. One was because I figured people would know you, know your name, and it might attract people to actually come and listen. And 2, you were comfortable with the technology, and I didn't want to have someone who was going to stress me out at the very beginning of the entire conference, first time ever doing it. So it was helpful to have someone who knew what they were doing from a technology standpoint as well. So again, thank you for agreeing 10 years ago to come on and talk. Your topic for that first session was why adult learning theory is insufficient to drive learning. Can you just tell us a little more about that topic? Is it still relevant today? Has much changed over the intervening years, etc.?
sure. So, in one word, completely. And I mean completely still relevant. The back message behind the presentation in 2014 was that as much as things have changed in the prior 30 years in medical education, there is still this underlying belief that adults are self-directed. Andragogy and Malcolm Knowles did this wonderful thing where he basically misled our community, and maybe even today is still there's this commitment to andragogy and adult learning principles that is largely ungrounded in actual research and evidence. And so the point of the presentation was that if you assume that your learners already know how to learn, that they're self-directed, that they're rational, then you are making a really big assumption that's probably undermining the effectiveness of your education. And in fact, what we've learned in the 30 years prior outside of education, and now another 10 years, so let's say 40 to 50 years in cognitive psychology and behavioral science, we know that by and large, for 90% of people, for 90% of the time, we're not necessarily thinking rationally and systematically. We're thinking more impulsively, irrationally. And if you go back and view that presentation, you'll learn a couple things. One is that we can structure our content and the environment in which we deliver our education in far more effective ways that support an irrational or less self-directed learner. And that's probably the main takeaway. The second takeaway is it was 2014 and we were still using 4x3 slides, right? So premise that is like, even when we're in large presentation halls, the screens that we were being asked to present on were 4x3. The third thing you'll take away is, conservatively, Derek, you and I were pushing about 450, 475 pounds at the time. I think if you look at the first
That's what it looked like.
I know I was well over
And our hair.
250, and by judging by going back and watching the video, Derek, much taller than me, was probably pushing 230 is my guess back then.
I think that's fair. That's fair.
And yeah, we had hair and it was not gray.
Darker
But
color.
as far as the content is every bit as relevant now. Every bit as relevant. We need to be far more intentional in how we design and deliver education, and not just like they're self-directed, they'll learn it themselves, let's just give it to them. And I think we've proven, certainly within Archimedics, we've proven with 20 plus million data points that if you can get learners to engage by structuring and nudging the experience, that learning will be 4 to 6 times more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And a quick shout out to Greg Salinas, who in his presentation that came like 1 or 2 after yours used Prezi. So it's not using the slides. We maybe all got sick and wanted to puke from being dizzy from all the circling around afterwards. But he gave it a shot. Remember Prezi?
I do remember Prezi. In fact, in 2010, the one thing I can actually go to on Prezi is that I had created what at the time was known as the unauthorized history of the CME profession.
I think I remember that.
Revisited all the way back to like the late 60s, very early 70s, how we got there. And in that context, Prezi worked pretty well because you can kind of hop along a timeline and then dig deeper into the content at any point in that timeline. So the spatial opportunities in Prezi were important, but your dizziness comment should not be lost on anybody. Like most people were using it almost as like a maze, and you dive deeper and deeper and deeper and spin yourself out because it was new and it was innovative, and therefore it had to be better.
Hey, credit to them for giving it a shot. They tried something different. The success, I will.
But we were also, if I remember, was Google Plus, which CME Palooza did for a while until they shut it down on you, like in the middle of a year once, and you had to.
If you watch the oral history that by the time people see this will have already been posted, I talk about the aforementioned Google Plus, RIP, Google Plus. So beyond the topic, can you talk a little bit about what you remember about your experience doing CME Palooza for the first time?
I remember, and I hope this comes across the right way. I remember like the opening statement was at the time until today was a very sincere thank you to you for taking this responsibility on. And again, the backstory behind that is there's very few examples in the last 20 plus years of someone in our community truly embracing the idea of being a professional. We use the term the CME or CPD profession all the time, but in reality, we're probably better defined as a community, because a profession, by definition, is a cadre of like-minded scientists operating from a shared praxis with collective intent. So you're moving the science forward. And in our community, that doesn't happen that much. I think you and I have, for as long as we've known each other, always been wired to work out loud, which maybe makes more sense for me than it does for you, but you do, right? The introvert is still one that shares. We were both very early adopters of social media. And so the idea that you could gather a bunch of folks together to present meaningful, hopefully valuable information without immediately thinking like, how am I profiting from this? To me is, looking back, I don't know that there's been another example that's as powerful as what you did when you started CME Palooza. So it was a no-brainer to speak at the first one because, again, you and I are wired the same way. The idea of spending, I don't know, 8 hours working on a presentation around the schedule, making sure that it was available and really focusing on the value that we can deliver through that first Palooza session. It kind of just goes part and parcel with this idea that if we're truly a profession, then it's about scholarship and it's about contributing to the shared praxis, to the science that we're trying to advance. It was, I think how many sessions have you done over with something like 20 individual Paloozas and quick math, that's 180 sessions?
Yeah. I haven't counted about lately, but a lot. I think we can say
a robust catalog of research, of resources for this community that's not behind a paywall, that is more or less intended to deliver value. Every once in a while, there's a sprinkle of that like conflicting motivation where someone's just presenting so that they can get their brand name out, or they're presenting their data. And I think, one of the other reasons why it's still as valuable today is, as a community, we tend to present what we're doing. Like the motivation behind presenting is, look at me.
Right.
Versus there's a need in the community. I'm going to try to study it, understand it, and then present some new lessons that have advanced our science. And anytime there's an opportunity, whether it's the Alliance meeting or something like that, which is a membership organization which serves that purpose and serves it pretty well, there's nothing else like Palooza.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It's funny that you brought up what you had said, because I actually have this written. I took a couple of notes. I actually had this written down. So the very first comments from a presenter on CME Palooza, which were yours, this is what you said. I just thought it was interesting looking back now. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. I really think that we're going to look back a few years from now and realize you're doing something that adds so much value to what this community needs. I remember at the time you saying that, I'm like, I don't know about that, because I don't know if I'm going to do it more than this one. So I don't know if there'll be much to look back on.
Look at the goosebumps.
So that was very prescient of you, I would say. So thank you again for that. Well, we're past our 10-minute mark, but that's fine. We can call this 10, 15, 20 minutes, or 10 years and 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I have one last question for you, because this is CME Palooza and we're not all business here. Tell me about the last show that you binged, or something that you're watching currently that you highly recommend.
Oh, wait, they're two different questions. Something I've binged.
You can pick. Either one.
Something I've binged should come as no surprise to anyone who knows me, and that's Netflix Full Swing, 6-part documentary on the 2023 PGA Tour professional golf season. So that was. So would I recommend that, being the second question? Probably to like maybe 6 or 7 people in the community. What would I recommend? He late to the game, but huge fan of Sneaky Pete.
Oh, I have not watched that. Might have to check that
out. Really interesting, ever-changing. Sometimes you think they maybe wrote the next episode after they already shot the prior episode, because there's some like, oh, it's just conveniently out of character here. But if you can overlook that, 3 seasons of Sneaky Pete available on Amazon Prime.
Okay, excellent. I just finished The Gentleman on Netflix. Pretty good. I wouldn't say great, but pretty good. And then moving on to Shogun next.
I'm moving on to Tourist Season 2.
All right, excellent. All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of 10 years in 10, 15, or 20 minutes. Thank you, Brian, for your time today. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Do remember that CME Palooza Spring is coming up on April 24th. Mark that on your calendars, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.